atheists are like David. What are they postulating when they say there is no God? They're going against a self-evident truth. They're going against a self-evident truth. A truth that is true by default. And when someone goes against a self-evident truth, the onus of proof is on them. So I'm not saying we don't have evidence. We have plenty of theological, philosophical, fitri, innate evidence to show that God exists, for sure. But the reason I'm mentioning this is to show that their position is unnatural, it's not intuitive, and that we don't have to do the defending. They have something to defend. We need to take the intellectual ground, the center of the ring. I like boxing, right? And a good boxer takes the center of the ring, right? He's not on the ropes, unless he's very good, yeah? Like Muhammad Ali, very defensive. But the point is, generally speaking, you take the center of the ring, and you're trying to push them back. That's what I'm trying to say here. The atheists should not request evidence as a default point of the discussion. We should say to them, where's your evidence? This doesn't mean we don't have evidence, by the way. So, why am I claiming that the atheist position is like David? The atheist position is denying a self-evident truth. Well, let's look at the nature of self-evident truths. Let's look at the features. By the way, these are features, not criteria. Because if there's criteria, then they're really not self-evident truths anymore. These are features. We know they're self-evident truths, and we see certain features of self-evident truths. So, some features of self-evident truth include the following. Number one, it is universal. What do I mean by universal? What I mean by universal is that it is not the product of a specific set of social circumstances or a specific group of people. It doesn't mean there is a consensus. We're not saying it has to be a majority. Universality here means it's not the product of particular social or biological conditions. For example, believing that the past exists, the universe is older than 5 minutes ago, believing in the past existing is not the product of just Omanis. It didn't come from the Omani social biological conditions. It's not the product just of the Kenyans or the Chinese or the British. It's universal in that it transcends specific cultural, social, and biological conditions. Is this clear? So, the self-evident truth of the past being real, that the past is older than 5 minutes, that the past exists, is a self-evident truth. And that self-evident truth doesn't necessarily have to have everyone agreeing with it, but that it's universal from the point of view that's not based on social, biological circumstances of a specific group. Is this clear? So self-evident truths are universal. Number two, they are untaught. You don't learn self-evident truths. And what do I mean by learn here? Let's be careful. That someone external to you taught it to you. I don't remember any time at school when a teacher said to me, Hamza, time is real. What happened yesterday is real. The universe didn't just begin 5 minutes ago. Last week was real. 2 weeks ago was real. You're never taught that. Never. But you understand it through your introspections, through your experience with the real world. So it's untaught from the point of view there's nothing external to you that teaches this to you. Clear? So time being real, the past being real, the universe not being created 5 minutes ago is untaught. Third and final feature. It is natural and intuitive. What does this mean? This means this belief, this idea, this concept, this self-evident truth, this thing that is true by default, is the product of a functioning psyche. Right? You have your cognitive and psychological functions as normal. Also, it means that it is the most simplest and comprehensive idea explaining a particular phenomenon. For example, we have the concept of time, the past, the present, and the future. If someone says to you, the universe began 5 minutes ago, there is no past beyond that, there is no past beyond that, that's not an adequate explanation of reality. Because what does reality say? I have memories, you have memories. I have an age, you have an age. And it's more than 5 minutes ago. We have historical objects. We have the psychological appreciation of time, temporal depth, and so on and so forth. So that postulation that the universe was created 5 minutes ago, there is no time beyond that, doesn't make sense comprehensively of the data. Clear? Good. So one would argue, time being real, in terms of there was a past beyond 5 minutes, makes sense of our appreciation of the temporal depth of time, makes sense of our memories, makes sense of our experiences, makes sense of the grey beards in front of me, right? They didn't get those grey beards 5 minutes ago, that's for sure. So do you see the point? So these are the features of self-evident truth. You could apply this to any self-evident truth. You would see these features when you point out something and say, this is a self-evident truth. For example, one would argue, notwithstanding the theological debate on idealism and realism, from a popular level and even from a perspective of science and the philosophy of science, believing that there is an external world external to your mind is a self-evident truth. It's true by default. I'm not saying you can't challenge it. I'm not saying you can't have a discussion, but it's true by default. And let's see, does it have the features of what we just discussed? Number one, it's universal. Absolutely. You go to Kenya, they say the world is real, right? And if you say it's not real, you may get a slap, yeah? Right? Your imama is external to your mind. Your sandals are external to your mind. The wall is external to your mind. People in Oman appreciate there is an external world. It's not just in here. People in China, people in Britain, it's not the product of a specific social biological circumstances. So it's universal. Number two, it's untaught. When was the last time someone taught you at school, you know your jacket, this is not in your brain, it's on your body in the outside external real world. You know that person there and that person there, they exist outside of you, they're not inside your head. You're not in the metaverse, not yet anyway, yeah? So do you understand the point? So it's untaught. Third point, it's natural and intuitive. It's the product of a functioning psyche. And it's the simplest and comprehensive explanation of the data. What's the data? I'm touching and feeling things. They seem to be outside my mind. I can see things external to me in some sense. If I say no, it's all just in my head, I've got more work to do. I have to now answer more questions, such as, well, how do I explain these feelings? How do I explain the objects that I touch? How do I explain things that I see? How do I explain other people's perception that there is an external world? So you've got more explaining to do. It's not comprehensive. It raises more problems than it solves. So this was another self-evident truth with the same features. Untaught, universal, natural and intuitive. Clear? All right. So how do we make sense of God then? By the way, and when we're talking about God here, we're talking about His creative agency. Al-Khaliq. He is the creator. We're not talking about His Ar-Rahman, Al-Wudud, Al-Rahim, Al-Hakim, Al-Alim, the wise, the knowing, the loving, and so on and so forth. Well, you need revelation for that. God announces Himself to mankind. We're talking about the aspect that God is a creator. There is a creator for things. The underlying basic concept of a creator. When there is a painting, you know there's a painter. When there is a garden that's been arranged nicely, there is a gardener. And so on and so forth. This is what we're talking about. When there is a building, there is a builder. When there is a cake, there is a baker. Do you see my point? The underlying basic concept of prior causal connections or prior causal conditions or a prior cause or a prior creator. This is what we're talking about. Because that is fundamentally the underlying basis of Al-Khaliq, the creator creating the universe. Make sense? So let's see if the features exist with regards to the creator. Number one, it's universal. Absolutely. Go anywhere in the world and you will see that people would say there was a creator that created the universe. And this self-evident truth is not based on a specific social biological conditions. Yes, 50% of Germany may be atheist, majority of China may be atheist. That's irrelevant. We're not saying universality means consensus. We're saying universality means it's not the product of a specific social biological conditions. So the belief in the creator is universal. Two more left. It's untaught. I never went to school and my teacher had to teach me that when there's a painting, that requires a painter. When there is a building, it requires a builder. When there is a carved piece of wood, it requires a carpenter or wood sculptor, whatever you call it, right? When there is a statue, there is a sculptor, and so on and so forth. And then when you ask a child that hasn't been infected by social biological conditions, and you say, painting requires a painter, sculptor, what do you call that thing? Statue requires a sculptor, and so on and so forth. Then you say, the universe had some kind of creator. You don't learn that concept that is the basis for that answer external to yourself. You learn it introspectively as a child as you're growing up. And that's why some, I think, anthropologists or psychologists of religion would argue that if you put children on a desert island, they're going to believe in a creator. And even there is some studies, and obviously these studies are dhanni, they're speculative because they have their own assumptions, certain methodologies, but there are some studies, and there is conflicting data, so we sprinkle a bit of salt on it, right? You take it with a pinch of salt, rather. That even children that come from atheistic families, they still have this idea of a creator for the universe, and this idea of God. So, it's untaught. Third and final point, it's natural and intuitive. Obviously, the idea that things require a prior creator, prior causal conditions, painting requires a painter, a cake requires a baker, a statue requires a sculptor, and so on and so forth. The universe requires a creator. This is the product of a functioning psyche, yeah? Also, it's the intuitive, it's the most simple and comprehensive explanation for things that have emerged in some kind of complex way. A painting. No child or even an atheist is going to say the painting just appeared. No one will do that. When they see an amazing statue, they're not going to say, hey, the statue was, it was a gust of wind. Right? When they go to a garden, they see an arrangement of flowers that says, I love muscat. Right? They're not going to say, hey, that was just a camel breathing and the flowers somehow just came together. That's an irrational postulation. Similarly with the whole universe and its systems, and the systems in the universe itself, the galaxies, the intricate nature of things, the world, the earth, the interconnecting principles of nature, the principles of biology within this micro-universe, the human being, and the macro-universe, the universe outside, all of this intricacy and apparent design is best explained by a creator. It answers most of the questions. It doesn't create far more problems than it solves. So it's intuitive, it's comprehensive as an explanation. But if you say there was no creator, then you got a problem. You have the problem of inconsistency. Painting, painter. Building, builder. Baked cake, baker. Statue, sculptor. Universe, nothing. There's an inconsistency. There's an inconsistency. And then nothing, you now try and explain that the universe somehow came from nothing. It creates far more problems than it solves. Because conceptually, from nothing, nothing comes. If you have nothing and you wait a lot of time, and nothing by definition is the absence of anything, no prior causal conditions, no properties. So if you have an eternal infinite nothing with no properties, no prior causal conditions, no potential, no thing at all, how on earth can you say that anything came from that? Wallahi, to even dare to postulate such a thing, you have to be irrational. Totally irrational.